Hi and welcome to another exciting episode of Learning Power BI. Today, let's recap what we did in our last session. In the last session, we overviewed all the options available under the view and the modeling menu of Power BI desktop. We did see options such as relationships, measures, columns, table, table type column, formats, category, summarization, roles, and groups. So at a very high level, if I have to review this with you, relationships are the connections between the two tables what you have in the Power BI desktop. Measures are the formula which you apply across the table and to arrive at a common figure. It can be a formula, or it can be an average, it can be sum, it can be a product, it could be percentage of out of certain based on certain criteria, and so on and so forth. Columns are adding a new column and updating its type. Table, we did create a manual table, also import it from different options such as Excel, CSV, SQL Server, and Access database. Format, we did change the formats of the columns, and we did see how did the rules were applied, the steps were applied on the right hand side of the Power BI desktop. We could create categories and summarization based on the columns. We did see how to restrict the view of the data present in the table by use of roles. So this is an effective way of showing or hiding the content roles. Then we did see how to group the columns into column values into certain order. So we could say north having certain cities, south having certain cities. We did group in the last session based on alphabets, and then we ungrouped them as well. Today's session, let's have a look at the more important concepts of what is data and relationships present in Power BI desktop. As we saw based on our previous learnings that we can import tables, we can build relationships across them. Now today we'll do a little bit in detail identifying what are the options available while connecting one table to another table. What are the do's and the don'ts what we need to take care while we import certain pieces of data? How do you measure, or how do you identify, do you need the data completely on the Power BI desktop, or you don't mind only querying the data as and when needed based on the certain criteria? So this is one of very important sessions wherein the crux of creating relationships of the background in the background will help you build a very powerful visual on top of it. Also, particular option of cross filtering. Do you want to filter data singly or on the both sides? These are certain technical terms which we are going to study today. Let's have a look with respect to data connections and have a look at an example. So now we are right now on Power BI desktop. As you can see, I don't have any updates available over here. So I'm on the latest version of Power BI desktop. This is one check which you always need to do. Moving on. Now let's have a look of many to many relationships. So as I said, if I go back and open this data connections, there are two ways in which you can directly connect to the data, and there is a hybrid way which is a dual mode. So the difference between import, direct query and dual mode is import means you would import entire set of data into the Power BI desktop. This will make your Power BI file with the extension PBIX a very heavier file. This one can be bypassed doing a direct query. So direct query would not import the data completely into the Power BI desktop. However, it would only query the data and pull the data as and when needed by the end user. And there is a dual mode in which a caching is enabled into the system, wherein a repeated calls to the Power BI query would force Power BI desktop to save certain sets of data for further use till the time the cache is invalidated. Rest of the times, the data stays back into the server, and some data which you have imported would stay with the Power BI desktop. This is more of kind of network versus Power BI file threshold. As and when you feel the file is getting heavier, you would slowly move towards a direct query. As and when you feel direct query takes lots of time and there's a bulky data coming over, that's when you would import it. So when you are in two minds, it's better to import the data and work on it. Else, many a times you can do a direct query. Yes. So when we say import a data, I have one piece of data which is GL master old and MIS mapping. So if I go here and try to identify, is it a direct query? Yes, GL master is a direct query. If I see Excel, is it a direct query or an import? It is an import. So the data completely resides over here. MIS GL CC mapping. In this case, is it import? Yes, it is import. I also have a relationship. Let's have a look at this. It has many to many relationship given, which I previously said is not possible in Power BI desktop. This is a workaround to have many to many relationship. Now let me undo this what I have done and show you how to get this import and direct query working together at this state. So let me delete the data from here. It gets deleted from the model. It will go off. Perfect. And now let's delete this as well. So this window and what you see, the relationships, are the models in Power BI desktop terms. Please remember we are on the model screen. Now let's import some piece of information. Okay, I want to do a SQL Server import. I say connect. Now as I want to connect with this, there is an option to import or perform a direct query. So let's do one thing. I have one server which you won't be able to view the server name. And I'm saying it as import. So when I do an import, it would connect to the database based on the previous credentials what I've fed in. I will find out the database name within the database server. I say I want this as this table to be imported into Power BI desktop. So now till the time it is getting imported, it would show there is pending changes because there's an ongoing change which is asking the Power BI to hold. Let's wait for this data to come in. As soon as it is completed, you will see this table added into the model window over here. Let it come. Yes, now it is connecting. Loading the data into the model. It has now got 100 rows, odd rows. Yes, there we are. At the same time, if it finds any relationship, it would try to connect to it. So I'll also show you how to avoid these auto relationships as well sometime later in this episode. Now, let me pull in another piece of information, a SQL Server data, onto this model. I'm again connected to the No, I'm not wanting the import. Let me undo this. I do not want the import over here. Let me do this. I'm saying I want to do a direct query. Alright. And there are advanced options as in, do you have any SQL station? And do you want to include relationship columns? So if there are master key and foreign key, primary key relationship, do you want to maintain them while you want to import, like we saw in the earlier products table? Right now, we don't want anything of the advanced option. We just say direct query to one of the tables. So when we say GL master, and when I go here, I have this table structure in my head, which I exactly know there is something known as GLs available in this column as well. And I say load. As soon as I say load, you would get an idea. First, the system will evaluate, then it would try to connect, then would try to import. Meanwhile, it would keep showing us as pending for changes. Let it load. There we are. Let's scroll over to the right. Yes, our table is here. Now let's see what kind of property does it have. It has a direct query. At any given point of time, you can change direct query to import. But this can happen only once. You cannot change import to direct query later on. So right now I'm not changing any of its properties. If you want to give a description, you can give it so. Now, a funny thing to look over here is if I try to do this employee ID and employee ID, and if I try to make many to many, this relationship, this should be used if it is expected that neither column contains unique values significant. And now it is changed to many, right? At the same time, if you want one to many or many to one, you can do it so as well. So these days, since you connected to this system and on a latest Power BI desktop, you can actually have many to many relationships. Why are we on many to many relationship? Many to many relationship is used when you have a table such as this. Have a look at this. GL master. Where is GL master old? If you have GL number such as this, see, there are non-unique rows in this table. 4350500 getting repeated over and over. At the same time, if we go into this table, you can't see the data because it's a direct query. However, we can connect to it when, let's have a look at it. By doing get data, again, we can directly, yes, and I say direct query. I'm connecting to the DB not to get the data. Alright, now, okay, I have entered a wrong ID. I go back. 50. Okay. And now it has the credentials. I would show you what is the problem. What do we mean by the term many to many? When we say this term, and if I go down, okay, we can't view this. Alright. So what happens is if you have many to many relationship till now, till the current day, the problem used to get resolved by having another table which was calculated out of the system and then ensure that it always holds unique values, and that was referred by these two tables. However, as we did a direct query, and since it is a type of two different kinds of imports, one is the import function and one is a direct query, two ways in which we are trying to connect to the database. That is the reason Microsoft opened this feature for such configuration. When there are dispersed databases of different kinds talking to each other, Microsoft said we would remove the restrictions of many to many and permit Power BI desktop to have many to many relationship. So in this case, I exactly know there is GL account number and GL, both are the same things. So if I try to build a relationship, it would try to GL account number. It's still determining the cardinality and it sees automatically it's a cardinality. Do you want to apply security filter on both the sides? Yes. Do you want single mapping? This table filters the other table or the other table filters this table? Both ways. So cross filter direction means which table's data follows which table. In this scenario, GL master data follows the data selected in MIS GLCC mapping table. If it is another way of doing it is GLCC mapping table follows the GL master old table, or you want both to work together, each filtering the other. So these are the three ways of cross filter direction which we have. Do you want to have security filter in both directions or no? and make this relationship active, or do you don't want to have this active? We say it is active relationship. We want security filter, and it comes up with a warning which we saw just back, that we are okay with it. Now we have many to many relationship. Now if we go back and see in our desktop, let's take a new screen, right? This is many to many. All right, now let's take a look at GL. We don't want invoices, we want GL master. Let's say I have a GL master. Okay, and now I'm also having, and let me change it to a filter. So there we are. Now let's have a look at this table, and I say there is a GL available over here, and I filter it again. So now if you look at it, if I do this, it would not show because it doesn't have a value. If I say 4200, so just to enable this kind of a thing, let's do drop down, scroll it down to, probably this is already sorted, so 2450, 2450, and you would see that value is available over here. Now if I say this, it gets filtered. Now so this is a both ways filtering, right? 4200, 50, let's say this, and now if you go back, that's not there. Let's see 4200150. Is it there? Not there. There you 204050. 204050. And if I change it to list and it's present. So this is the dual filter what we have. Now let's change the relationship over here. Let's say GL account number would be followed by GL. So whatever you select over here, this would get auto filtered. So now let's go back to our drawing board, which is the model, and let's click on the relationship. Let's say the GL master old filters this table. So which one is GL master? GL account number is the master old will filter GLCC table. So this master old will filter GLCC table. And when I say this, okay, and I say okay, now this one filters this, so it is a singular direction. Did you see the direction where it is going? That means whatever you select from the old table would be reflected and filtered on the new table. Now let's go back to the charts. Now this is the old table, this is the new table. So 420045 42004 050 was the number. So let's search 42004050, 42004500 050. This one gets filtered. Now let's do one thing. Now let's select 42004 over here. Where is my 42004 050? Did you see a fact that after selecting, where is the number? Yes, you've selected a value, but it did not filter the parent. So this kind of a parent-child relationship can be formed in this system. So here we saw how did the GL master old drive the MIS GLCC mapping table. If this is kind of many to many relationship going from left to right. If I change the direction and I say, what if the other table will follow the first one? So in this case, it would be GL account number. Whatever you select over here would get reflected as MIS GLCC. And we say OK. So now the direction of it is changed. Now if we go back to the reporting table, what I'm trying to tell you is GL was part of which table? MIS GLCC would drive GL master. So this table would drive this table rather than this table driving this table. So now if I remove this aspect, now let's see 42004-250. Do we have it? Yes, we do have it. But the same thing, if we select over here and if I try to remove over here, it would still stay. What has happened is the security aspect has taken over. Let's do one thing, many to many relationship. This is how things are. This is what we are trying to do. And we say, okay, let's go back and let's do 42004-050. Yes, there we are. It has been selected. If you say 100, it would also get selected. If there are more than one values over here, if I want to change the property, see, I have a selection control over here. I want to say multi-select. I've set single select all off. That means I can select more than one. So now it has turned into a radio button rather than a checkbox. And I say multi-select, single select off. I will revert it, multi-select on. Okay, I have to click control and select all option, which I don't need. So by default it is multi-select. You can move it to single select if you select that value. Now let me see, if I select two values, then two values would show up. So this table is driving GL account table. The point to note. So based on your usability, importance of the table, you can set the hierarchy and controls based on the dependency variable, which is this relationship, also selection variable, which is in the property of that selected visual under selection control. Using these two combination, it is very easy to drive filters on your screen. So today, right now, what did we see? We saw import, we saw direct query. Dual mode is something which you can set. So once you set an item in dual mode, system in itself will decide does it want to cache it or query it or import it. So this is a mid state amongst import and direct query. Direct query is no data imported like we saw over here. If I go back to the table, direct query table is not shown because zero data is imported from that table. It's only the table and the relationship driven outside it. This reduces the load on PBIX file, whereas this is helpful only when you are okay with the network load and of up to 10 million rows. So if you have up to 10 million rows, you can go for direct query, but the load on your network and the load time would increase exponentially based on your network bandwidth and the client desktop. So it's more like a choice which a conscious developer or a designer or a business user who's making this Power BI dashboard to take. Ensure you choose an option which is wise enough for you to drive the business and the user does not wait for the data to arrive. Usually, direct queries are used for small master tables or some dynamic tables which keep on changing. If you want to query probably a stock market, or probably you want to change number of sales amount which is getting accumulated over the day. So rather than refreshing entire data over the period or periodically, you can have a set of tables which would be a summarized table which would just show the summary of the actual data, which would be quick enough for you to see and really handy for the end users. The major chunk of the background data can be refreshed later on. Right now we are good with the
key metrics getting captured. In such scenarios, you can go for direct query. And data import are for those tables wherein you feel there is huge data which has to travel over the network, and you want to do certain more calculations based on additional columns and measures, that is formulas within Power BI desktop. So these are the two major ways of doing it. Dual mode can be set, but please ensure that if you set something to import, you can't go back and change it to dual mode or direct query. We did see cross filtering, that is single or dual. Dual means both sides. This helps you create a hierarchy of control based on related tables. Which major tables filters the other one. Now we did see many to many relationships today. Let's have a look at one to many and many to one and how they are used. Let's identify them in our current piece of information. If I have to go over here, if you see 1 is to many, what can be 1 and where it can be many? So for every order, then can be more than one invoice. So that way it can happen. If you want to see what the one order ID can have more invoice, correct? Similarly, one order can have more order details. One order number can be 1 and it can have 5 different items to be sent or collected. So for every row item, there is an order detail. So this is a master, this is the child. Similarly, if there is a shippers, so shippers has shipper ID. So there can be one person ordering multiple things. And for every order, there can be multiple invoices, there can be many items within the order. So realize one person, a shopper, will have more orders, or a shoppers or shippers. Shippers is like the transportation guy, can have many orders to be collected and sent. This is one way of looking at it. If you scroll down, this is again, one customer can have many orders. So if you look at it, if you want to see what the relationship is all about, customer ID is across. So this customer can lie across many orders. This can be possible. So this is one to many. This is also one to many. This is also one to many. Please ensure that you read the table from in the direction of the arrow. So when the arrow is from right to left, you please read it from right to left. So this is one to many in terms of products. When it is this is one to many in terms of customer names. This is one to many in terms of employee IDs. And if I have to tell you, where is many to one? So let's search for many to one. Is there a many to one relationship by any chance? We don't see that. What if I change this direction to many to one? Will it work or will it throw me an error? Let's have a look. So if I say single, if I say both directions, so sometimes you are not permitted to have both directions. Sometimes, so if I say both, what happens? So it is both directions. So certain tables will permit you to have both directions and single directions based on this. If I change it to many and I say many to one, then I only get this option. So this is not an ideal criteria. I would rather go back to where it was and I say okay, so this would go from here. So one to many or many to one and many to many. These are the three ways in which you will ideally filter and create relationships. If you want to view all your relationship, you have a box at the top on the ribbon, which you can say manage relationship, which would show all the present relationships. Do you want to inactivate certain relationship? You can do so. This is used just in case you are working on certain things. and the relationships which are inactive are shown with the dotted line. So this is all about relationships did we see today. Now let's have a look at rest of the things. Data and relationship. This is known as cardinality. When you see star 1, star and star together, what happens? The most common default type, which means a column in one table can have more than one instance of a value, and the other related table often knows the lookup table has only one instance of a value. So in many to one relationship, the table on the many side will have many instances of the value, whereas on the table on the right hand side, on the one side would have only unique value present over it. When it is one to one, that means you cannot have repetitive values for that column on both the sides of the table, and then it would be one to one table. Many to many relationship. With this composite model, you can establish many to many relationship between tables, which removes the requirements for creating unique values in the table. So why did they say sometimes you may not be able to create many to many relationship? In this scenario, you would have to create a central table taking unique values from both the tables. Then that table is referred from one to many and one to many for both the things. So this used to be a workaround for quite some time, and it is still prevailing in most of the cases. So either you do a many to many relationships, but if you feel it is too complicated and it is very difficult to handle, you are losing track. In that case, you might go for a common table which would hold unique values, and that common table is in one to many relationship with the actual tables. So this is all about cardinality in the relationships. Moving on. Now what did cross filter direction do? So when you set it to both, the most common and default direction means for filtering purposes, both tables are treated as if they are single table. Both works well with single table that has a number of lookup tables around it. An example is sales actuals table with a lookup table for a department. This often is a star schema. So in the database, you have star schema wherein one is in the center and all the spokes are form the lookups. If you have two or more tables that also lookup table with some in common, then you would want to use both settings. To continue the previous example, in this case, you have a budget sales table that records target budget for each department. It's more like target of sales, and the department table connected to both sales and the budget table. Avoid the both settings for this kind of configuration. So because sales is in the middle, everything should, in this scenario, the ideal way of doing it would be starting for every budgeted department. We would try to gather all the sales done for every department in one central visualization. Also, there is a single filtering choice in the connected table work on the table where values are being aggregated. So if the values are getting aggregated, that means they are unique in that relationship, then you can set as a single direction. Now, what is a composite model? If I have to tell you, a model that combines data from more than one direct query source or that combines direct query with import is a composite model. So in our case, we have different kinds of data. One is an Excel data, one is a SQL import data, and one is a direct query data. So we already have three different kinds of data with us. In this case, it would be a composite model for us. What is an advantage by doing a composite model? The most commonly used advantage for composite model is many to many relationship. Why does it help us? Again, many to many relationship help us eliminate a third table and go on with our usual business. So now let's summarize what is direct query and import and how different they are from each other. So if you see,
If you do an import up to 10 GB of your complete PBIX files, okay, is allowed in your login in the Power BI Service Cloud. Whereas direct query, there is no limitation, because if you look at it, practically there is no data on the file. Therefore, Power BI service cannot have any restrictions on it. Therefore, there is no limitation on it. What is a data source? If you do an import, you can actually import it from multiple data sources like we saw. And here, if you do a direct query, you can query only singular table. If you look at it, you cannot have more than different kinds of data coming from a single direct query. Then data change in the underlying data performance. If you see, import is much closer to the visualization, therefore the performance is very high because the data is just residing behind the visualization. Whereas the performance of a direct query depends on the source, the network bandwidth, the internet connectivity, and the query, the data which is getting pulled, the size of the data. Everything together sums up to show some performance. So the performance is better in import, but it is not in direct query. Data change in the underlying data. If you have a master data or a database from which you have imported a piece of information on your Power BI desktop and then deployed on a Power BI service, in this case, if your underlying data in your SQL Server changes or any that kind of a database changes, in that case, it would not get reflected automatically in the Power BI desktop and the service together. You would probably have to import it manually or schedule a refresh based on your timings of the data. In this case, please remember, when you schedule a refresh, the database does get locked. So any other additions of data, deletions of data would reduce the speed at which they usually occur. And then direct query has caches. When you say dual data, it has caches of data for better performance. So it is necessary to refresh to ensure the latest data. A scheduled refresh, it is up to the 8 scheduled refreshes that can happen, whereas you can schedule as often as every 15 minutes. So the scheduling mechanism is awesome in direct query, whereas there is a limitation on the number of scheduled complete refreshes which is possible in the import. Power BI gateway only required to get the latest data from an on-premise data source, and for the direct query must require to get data from on-premise data source. So if you have an on-premise data source, only then you need to have this Power BI gateway. So gateway, as I said, is a tool which would help you connect your Power BI cloud with your database. Please remember, we would have a demo of gateway coming up soon. Data transformation import will permit you to do all kinds of transformation, whereas direct query would support as many data transformation with some limitations, because since the data does not reside with you on the Power BI desktop, it is expected that there would be limitations in the transformation. Data modeling, there is no limitation for any kind of modeling you would want to do. Create relationships, create more tables, add data, remove data, stuff like that in data modeling. But there are limitations in the direct query because some auto detect relationships between tables and relationships are limited to a single direction. So if you have direct query, many a times you would only have single directional data. The dual directions, like we saw in the earlier example today, may not be possible. We can ignore the size, it is getting repeated. A built-in date hierarchy so is available over here. So if you have a date column applied in your system, then you can have a hierarchy. We'll shortly have a look at this. There is any date hierarchies is not available in direct query. Then if you look at it, so now coming back to the DAX expressions, it supports all kinds of DAX expressions. You can
see these DAX queries in a way, what all formulas you see in their Excel, similarly, those are the same ones or Power Pivot thrown up in this Power BI. So all kinds of expressions and the functions are available over here. Whereas there is a restrictions on use of complex DAX functions such as time, basically time and date hierarchy, something which is used so often is not supported well in the direct query. However, if there is a date table available in the underlying source, then it supports. So there are many ifs and buts in the direct query. In terms of performance is what direct query excels in. For rest of the things, probably and performance and the size, direct query excels, whereas rest of all the properties, it is observed the tilt is towards the import. Clustering, like we saw yesterday, clustering of columns, calculating tables out of a table, quick insights, those are like who accessed what. Q&As are not available in direct query, whereas it is available in import. So Q&As are a very good feature for end business users, the key guys, to query the data by themselves by understanding certain things of the querying format, and they get their relevant answers in a graphical as well as numeric form, which is very helpful for the key guys to make their decisions. So if we don't have it in direct query, sometimes the user would ask you to import the data and change data count connectivity. So if you are on an import, it is not possible to change, as I said, to direct query. But direct query can be changed to import. It is a unidirectional change. It is an irreversible change, right? So now, if I have to tell you, pick things such as schedule refreshes, I can show it to you in Power BI like this.
So now let's have a look at the built-in date hierarchy which is present over here. So what do we mean by date hierarchy? If you go back to your Power BI desktop and if we have a look at this, any date field can give you a hierarchy as in year, quarter, month and day. If you want to view certain things by year, quarter, month and day, you can by default system helps you get that year, quarter, month and day from the date field. So this is the hierarchy created by the system. Similarly, you might want an address hierarchy kind of stuff. So hierarchies in this Power BI desktop is very useful to group or derive a data based on slices and dices. If you go back again to this Power BI story, DAX expression supports all kind of them, whereas not few of them are not supported in the import in the direct query. So what are DAX expressions? So DAX expressions, if I have to tell you, any measures which you write on top of this would be a DAX query. So when you say add a new measure, in this whatever you try to add would be a DAX measure. You might want to call it as probably it's disappeared. You might say right click and new measure. You directly go over here and say a formula underscore list. In this case, you have queries such as last date, non-blank, log, lower. It converts everything. So these functions, what you see over here, and helps you form a DAX query. In this case, you can have lower of the probably customer ID, so it doesn't come in that way. So you would have to first TBL count. If you say count number of values which result from evaluating an expression, or you just say count all, count the number of values in the column. In which column do you want to see? You want to have customer address or ID? I would say customer ID. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to demo, for example, formula ID, and I said tab. If it's right, it would accept. If it is not, then it would give me an error. Do I have anything? No, it's only a customer name. And I say yes, formula list. So if I try to bring it over here, did it result anything? No, it didn't. So there is some error in this. So you will have to go back and update this. So if I say count and I say this, and instead of this, I would like to do customer dot city, and I want to count that city. What happens? What happens? What happens? It gave me a chart. There are about 85 cities, 91 cities present. If I want to rename, because right now I started with list, but I said number of city. So in this case, what we saw over here is it gets updated as a real-time thing. It shows you the content. You might want to scatter. You might want to change the graph type by selecting it and changing the visualization. Right? You have so many different times. Since there are no slices in the city and it's a count and aggregated value, all aggregated value will end up being a dot or a bar or a singular color in this thing. So this is how the DAX query come into picture. Let's go back and see what do you what do you understand by the term refresh. So in this case, if you are doing a refresh, and then you would have to go into the dashboard datasets, you will see this. You have a credential as to what you want to refresh. You can have a scheduled refresh. If you have a defined source, then you can do it. So you need to have a gateway configured. Once you have the gateway configured, then only you can schedule a refresh. So a good thing to note over here is please configure the gateway before you schedule a refresh. Otherwise, it is a manual way of importing the data over here like this, right? Everything is getting updated. Once that is getting updated, you push the data by clicking on publish. Only then the changes what you've done would show on the Power BI service, which would be shown to everybody online based on the roles you configure. So like we said, let this refresh get over. Once it gets it didn't get over. For some reason, there was an error in one of the table. Why there was an, let's not publish it till the time we refresh the data. So we'll have to do it again. So it is getting refreshed. It has some data in the previous table. So this is the table. MIS GLCC table is what we need to check. So MIS GLCC table needs to be viewed. Since it is a direct query and it is in relationship with something, that is the reason there is an issue over there. So a better way of doing things would be, let's change the direction as both, apply security to both, and we say okay, make it okay, make it the dual direction. Now click on refresh, hoping that things would be alright. If not, then there is something else which we can troubleshoot in the later sessions. Alright, so we'll keep this aside. This is for a later sessions. How do we do it? Once this is set, we import it to the Power BI service. So this was the another piece of information, as in how do we schedule the refresh. Then the data transformation is fine. Modeling, we did see modeling and its associated capabilities. Okay. Today, what is Q&A? What is quick insights? So quick insights are something which is, if you go to the desktop and you go in general, you might want to see your workspace, And there are these arrow mark. These are your quick insights. So this arrow marks would help you if you go to the reports. You would like to see the reports like this. It shows how many people access the matrix and who was the person who accessed it. How many people, since it is nobody's access, since we've not shared with anybody, it shows zero value. Did they view it on the sharing screen or a workspace? What was the platform? Was it mobile or a web? What was the report page did they use? Is it all few? All that can be tracked based on what they have done. Please remember, the report is automatically generated by Power BI to generate a matrix. Usage data is retained for 90 days. Changes to your report may take 24 hours to appear here. So, of previous 90 days, you can have all the data which is present to be viewed in the system. Coming back to this slide, clustering, we did see clustering, calculated tables, we did calculate columns on it. Quick insights, we saw it right now, Q&A. So based on this, you can have certain Q&As enabled. So how do you enable the Q&A? When you go to, for example, settings, you would be asked, do you want to enable the Q&A or no? So this is the checkbox. Under the dashboard, you have show Q&A yes or no. If you enable it, it would come. If you don't, it will not. So this is one area. Do you want to enable Q&A or no? Coming back to our PowerPoint slide. Yes, if you go back and change of data connectivity, as I said, it is not possible to change import to direct query, but it's possible to change direct query to import. So let's do one thing. Let's check, is it possible to change direct query to import? If I go back over here, I know I have imported two tables today. One was direct query. This was an import. If I change it to direct query, will it permit me? Let's have a look. It's not even selecting, right? Whereas if I go over here and I say import, it is getting changed. It also tells me an implication, as in setting the storage mode to import has the following implication. Please consider them carefully. A warning: setting storage mode to import is irreversible operation. As I said, you will not be able to switch back to a direct query. You would, by the way of deleting and re-adding it. In that, you might lose the columns. You will definitely lose the columns and the measures created in this table. This operation will refresh tables set to the import, which may take time. So this is what the drawback of the system is. So we'll have to be carefully choosing our next step and go ahead with it. Now moving on, what do we have next? We are through with this direct query versus import. We are very clear what we did today. Now some good practice: data and relationship. Query performance over big data. So it is more like, do you want to use direct query or do you want to use import? So you as a users interact with visuals on Power BI reports. DAX queries are submitted to the dataset. Boost queries speeds by caching the data at the aggregated level. As I said, aggregated tables are key columns from most used tables. It is a refined table having all the info. It is more like a summary table which is used over here, using a fraction of resources required at the detail level. Unlock the big data in a way that would otherwise would be impossible. That is how. So the idea is, when you are dealing with a huge amount of data which cannot be imported in the Power BI desktop, you would definitely fall back on the direct query. But when doing the direct query, you would also have to push on certain filters so that the data which is coming into your system via direct query is up to 10 lakh rows or otherwise 1 million rows. Data refresh optimization: reduce the cache size and refresh times by caching the data at aggregate level. So always have a dual mode enable, and the aggregate level, which is a master table or the summary table as I call it, and speed up the time to make the data available for the users. So rather than refreshing your entire table set, you just refresh the summary table based on direct query and you are good to go. Achieve the balancing architectures. Allow the Power BI in memory cache to handle aggregated queries, which it does effectively. Limit queries sent to the data source in the direct query mode, helping stay with concurrency limits. So there are certain concurrency limits which does not permit more query mode direct queries to be executed at once, the interest of denial of service and security. So please ensure you have that kind of balanced architecture. Queries that do not get through tend to be filtered. Transactional level queries which require data warehouse big data system normally handle well. So these are certain good practices which we need to keep in mind when we design a Power BI dashboard through the desktop. So today we just added on certain things based on our previous understanding, and we had an in-depth understanding of the models, relationships, the one is to many and many is to one, and then cardinality and aggregate functions, and how we saw how the many to many relationship come into picture. We also saw what are the measures which are available which we can make use of in an import. We saw the difference, fundamental difference between the import and the direct query. With this, we finished data and its relationships in today's lecture.